All right, thanks so much. So thanks for joining us for this technical briefing on the draft solid waste master plan phase 3. Just want to begin by recognizing that we are gathered here today on unceded, unsurrendered Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. On behalf of the city, I'd like to welcome councillors, staff, members of the media, and residents who are watching online. This briefing today will provide members of council with information on phase 3 of the city's draft solid waste master plan. My name is Sean Menard. I'm the chair of the Environment Committee. While the information presented today may be used to inform future decisions, no decisions will be made today. The solid waste master plan has been developed over the last 4 years using an industry best practice phased approach, with each phase being based on a solid foundation of research, data, best practices, and extensive engagement with key stakeholders and the public. In July 2019, Council approved the Solid Waste Master Plan Roadmap Report, officially starting the development of the city's next 30-year plan for managing waste within the current social, economic, and environmental context. The Phase 1 Solid Waste Master Plan Report was released by Council in June of 2020, and then in July of 2021, Council received the Phase 2 report and approved the vision statement, guiding principles, and goals for the Solid Waste Master Plan. Today, staff will be providing an overview of Phase 3, including proposed actions to reduce the amount of waste going to landfill, reduce GHG emissions, divert valuable resources to be recycled and repurposed into new products, and further preserve and expanded capacity at the landfill, providing time for the city to choose, plan, and implement its next residual waste disposal solution. A copy of today's presentation will be provided to council and media following the briefing. Speaking today are Alain Gantier, General Manager, Public Works Department, Shelley McDonald, Director of Solid Waste Service, and Nicole Houvier-Benez, Program Manager, Long-Term Planning. After the briefing, I'll open up the floor for questions from council in ward order, as we'd like to give everyone the opportunity to ask their questions in the allotted time frame. We just ask each councillor to ask one question with one follow-up. If your staff team is here as well, they can ask the question on your behalf, but I do see a number of councillors here. Thanks for joining us. Should you require further information or have additional questions, staff would be happy to follow up with you after the briefing. Media relations will bring the microphone to you when it's your turn to ask questions. When members of council have asked all their questions, we'll take a short recess before resuming with the media availability. I'll now hand it over to Alain Gantier, who will deliver opening remarks. Alain.
Thank you, Chair. So good afternoon, everyone, members of council, assistants, members of the media, and also distinguished guests. Bonjour à tous. Juste un peu de contexte au niveau de la présentation cet après-midi.
I'd just like to give you a little bit of context for this presentation. It will be done in English, or in French rather, or in English rather, but the slides will be in French, and there will be French documents shared with members of the council. We also are available to answer your questions in French if you wish.
So today is an exciting day. I know we're talking about solid waste, maybe not the topic that comes to mind every single day, but for us, it is a big day and a day that I'm very proud of the team and in terms of what we've accomplished. As Chairman Menard indicated, this has been 4 years in the making. So this is not something that we just started with yesterday. There's been a lot of effort, but there's also been a lot of engagement leading us to this stage. And as the chair indicated, the process that we followed basically went through a lot of best practice, a lot of stakeholder and resident engagement to make sure that basically we're presenting to you a plan that we can be very proud of. And one of the important piece about the plan is that there's a recognition that waste management is a challenge universally. It's not just something that's unique to Ottawa. It's very much a challenge that we're all facing. And the safe, the efficient, and sustainable management of waste directly affects the health and cleanliness of our community. And what makes it more complicated is as we continue to grow as a population, as we start to see changes in terms of the industry, as we see basically people's lifestyle behaviors and trends start to change, really it's impacting basically both the quantity and also the contents that are being disposed of that we have to manage. So it is very much an evolving topic. And this waste management plan really aims to tackle the challenges by supporting Ottawa in an effective way of managing its waste in a way that's going to be safe, that's going to be affordable, and also environmentally sustainable. So before I begin the presentation, I just want to reiterate one of the points that Chairman Nutter indicated in terms of the process, in terms of what you can expect. So what we're tabling today, or what we're presenting to you today, is the draft solid waste master plan. This draft is going to be made available in terms of the legislative report along with the waste plan following the meeting or this presentation. This report is going to be going to committee on November 21st and then December 6th to council. What we're going to be asking for council to do with that document is really to receive the document. It's still a draft. The intent is, once council has received the report, we're going to be going into the third engagement series with the community and key stakeholders so that we can come back with final recommendations to committee and council in Q2 of 2024. Le but de cette approche est de présenter l'ébauche.
The goal of this project is to ask for the draft to be approved in 2024. This will give us enough time for both the residents and the council members to look through the recommendations and understand them well before approving the plan in the second quarter of 2024.
McDonald.
Thank you, Alain. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Our team was busy over the last few months providing overviews of the waste plan's development to date to members of council. Today, we're eager to present the draft solid waste master plan, a first for Ottawa. Stakeholder input has taken place throughout the development of this plan, and we want you to feel confident that what we are proposing is understood by residents and in line with their hopes for how waste is managed in our community for the next 30 years. To start today's presentation, we'll provide a quick recap of the scope and framework for the plan before we discuss the many considerations that went into the waste plan's development. And as you'll see, there are a lot of factors that go into planning for waste management. We will then move on to walk through our planned path to achieving the aspirational council-approved vision of a zero waste Ottawa before discussing the waste plan's objectives and corresponding action suites. We'll provide an overview of the anticipated outcomes and financial implications of the proposed waste plan. As a reminder, we're not seeking funding right now, but rather want to highlight the magnitude of financial implications of all the action suites and what funding would be required if we were to remain status quo with our services. And then to wrap up, we'll discuss the next steps of the waste plan before providing a high-level overview of what the third and final engagement series of this plan will entail. Next slide, please. So before we get into the details, we thought it would be helpful to remind council what we are responsible for when it comes to managing waste as a municipality and how the provincial and federal governments play a role in regulating the industry. The regulatory framework affecting waste management is multi-jurisdictional and complex, with all three levels of government playing an important role with respect to varying elements of waste management. The City of Ottawa, as a municipality, is solely mandated to collect garbage and organic waste from residential curbside properties. Waste collections for the IC&I sector, which includes industrial facilities, commercial properties, construction and demolition waste, and institutional facilities, including City of Ottawa facilities, are all mandated by the provincial government. The province also mandates waste collection services for both the IC&I sector, and both the provincial and federal governments are mandated for the waste collection in the buildings they own and operate. Ottawa City Council, like many other municipalities, have decided, however, to approve waste collection for services mandated under the province. This includes multi-residential property waste collection from small businesses through the city's Yellow Bag program, Ottawa's on-street waste collection, organic waste collection from schools through the Green Bin in Schools program, and of course, waste collection in parks. For this reason, the sections on the screen within city regulated and council approved are all included within the scope of the solid waste master plan. Next slide, please. So by way of quick recap, in July 2019, Ottawa City Council approved the Solid Waste Master Plan Roadmap Report. This included approval for the scope and framework to develop a new waste plan for the city and the establishment of a council sponsors group. The waste plan was developed using a phased approach, and each phase being based on a solid foundation of research, data, best practices, and extensive engagement with key stakeholders and the public. Phase 1, highlighted in blue in this timeline, and provided council with key baseline information and data on the city's current waste management system, available mechanisms to influence waste reduction, policy, and diversion, an overview of detailed international research on emerging policy, programs, and technology trends, and provided council with an overview of the proposed engagement approach. This phase was received by council in June 2020. Phase 2, as shown in the blue and green on the timeline, involved engaging with stakeholders on the vision statement, guiding principles, and goals that would provide a framework for the waste plan. This phase also involved identifying future waste management needs, the long list of options to be considered to meet these needs, and the evaluation methodology to evaluate each option to develop a short list of options for consultation. The phase ended with a second engagement series seeking public and stakeholder feedback on the shortlisted options. Council received phase 2 on July 2021 and approved the vision statement, guiding principles, and goals for the waste plan. And finally, phase 3, as shown in green and orange on the screen, has involved developing the draft waste plan with recommended actions and associated implementation plans and timelines. We are very close to the completion of the waste plan, and I'm sure you are as excited as we are to see what's to come. As a reminder, Council approved the vision for the waste plan, a zero waste Ottawa achieved through progressive, collective, and innovative action, with the goals of the waste plan primarily following the 5 R's waste hierarchy framework that places top priority on reducing or preventing as much waste as possible, followed by recycling, recovery, and finally disposal. Zero waste is a philosophy and a call to action rather than an absolute target. It means working towards a future where nothing is wasted, ultimately leading to the conservation of natural resources and eliminating discharges to the land, water, and air. Zero waste cannot be achieved by a municipality on its own, but requires concerted effort and coordination between all levels of government, as well as industry, businesses, and consumers. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, several factors and key considerations contributed to the development of the waste plan. First and foremost, decisions must be made with regards to waste management this term of council. We are at a key juncture where the city must decide how waste will be managed in the future, and decisions must be made within a short time to ensure we're set up for success. At the forefront of this waste plan is the life of the Trail Waste Facility landfill. This key city asset could reach capacity between 2034 and 2035 if no changes are made to Ottawa's waste management and disposal habits. This waste plan focuses on how we, as a city, can support our residents in reducing the amount of waste sent to landfill to preserve airspace and defer costly alternatives to landfilling. To support that cost deferral, short-term actions are required to provide the city with enough runway or time for the approvals, design, and construction necessary to implement a new landfill or alternative technology. We know this can take between 8 to 15 years to implement. As you will soon learn, some of the proposed waste plan action suites could extend this runway or timeline for up to a collective 14 years. Another factor in this plan is our existing diversion programs and their success. At this time, they're not being fully utilized, leaving ample opportunity to increase diversion of materials from landfill and sending them to more appropriate processing facilities. In addition to existing waste programs, there are other opportunities for us to divert non-residential waste from trail, including a bulky waste diversion strategy and limiting types of waste that are accepted at the landfill. We are also in a position right now where 2 key contracts are expiring soon, and we have the opportunity to rethink how we want to process our organics and embrace new energy market opportunities for managing our landfill gas capture and utilization, both of which create significant opportunities to reduce GHG emissions. And finally, the provincial transition to IPR. This continues to create some uncertainties regarding how the city provides its services and will be an underlying factor as actions are rolled out. So lots to consider. And as we've said before, waste management and planning is complicated and requires a multi-pronged approach and a lot of strategic solutions. And we are looking forward to continuing to engage with you as our journey continues. So with that, I'm going to hand the remainder of the presentation over to Nicole.
Great. Thank you so much, Shelley, and good afternoon, everyone. So Shelley had mentioned the council approved vision for the waste plan is to work towards a zero waste future, which of course is recognized as aspirational. So to guide Ottawa towards a zero waste future, we first needed to understand what that future would look like. So this started with gaining an understanding of how much waste we have to manage as a city in the future, what industry trends are influencing waste generation, and then we pivoted to identifying the city's future waste management needs. So the amount of waste that the city will need to manage is forecasted to increase by just over 30% over the next 3 decades. So as is the case today, curbside residential households are expected to continue to generate the largest amount of waste that we will have to manage as a municipality. That's followed by multi-residential properties, waste from city facilities, waste that's coming directly to the trail waste facility landfill from a mix of both residents as well as businesses, and parks and public spaces. So given the increasing population that Alain had alluded to earlier, the changing waste composition and industry and lifestyle trends that are impacting the waste quantities, as well as the composition of the waste that we as a city are managing, Ottawa will not have the infrastructure capacity to manage the anticipated volume of waste at the trail waste facility landfill based on our current diversion levels. So in total, we identified 21 different core needs for the city's future waste management system. So that ranged everywhere from the need to increase reuse and recycling to increasing operational efficiencies and determining what our next garbage and organics processing facilities will be. Needs were prioritized based on when actions needed to be undertaken. So as Shelley had mentioned, we have a couple of key contracts that are coming to end. So of course, when we're looking at prioritizing the recommended actions, they're broken down into the short, the medium, as well as the long-term timeframe. So short-term being within the first 5 years of the plan, medium-term being within the 5 to 10-year range, and then the longer term being anything over between the 10 to 30-year range. So a variety of different options were carefully considered to determine which could best meet the unique needs of Ottawa. And of course, working towards achieving the vision, the goals, and the guiding principles of the plan that were set forth by council. So in the beginning, we had a total of 71 different options that were identified. They were evaluated and shortlisted. So these recommended actions were then grouped together within action suites, which we'll be walking through shortly, that are made up of a collective of recommended actions that will work towards achieving, or what we feel as staff will work towards achieving the objectives of the plan. So objectives help, of course, to organize which actions will address what needs, and will also help to act as targets for performance metrics. Next slide, please. So we have 5 objectives, which essentially follow the waste management hierarchy. They serve as the core policy framework that council approved for staff to follow in developing the waste plan. So nous recommandons de mettre en œuvre 50 actions dans les 30 prochaines années pour atteindre les objectifs du plan directeur.
We recommend 50 actions over 30 years in order to maximize, first of all, the recycling and utilization of waste. Objective 1 looks to maximize the reduction and reuse of waste. Objective 2 aims to maximize the recycling of waste. Objective 3 looks to maximize the recovery of waste and energy and the optimal management of remaining residuals. Objective 4 focuses on maximizing operational advancements and efficiencies. And last but not least, Objective 5 looks to develop a zero waste culture across the city. Getting to zero waste will require guiding and supporting the community to change their lifestyles and waste management practices.
So as I mentioned, the waste plan aims to tackle challenges across the waste system through 50 distinct actions. The management of solid waste, of course, is complex, as both Alain and Shelley had spoken about, and there is no one silver bullet solution to achieve the goals of the waste plan. So there's going to be a lot of information that we're going to be walking you through and to digest as part of the remainder of the presentation, but I'm going to walk you through each of those objectives as well as the recommended action suites to give you a better idea of how we are proposing to achieve each objective as well as the goals and vision of the waste plan. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, focusing on maximizing the reduction and reuse of waste. So we have 3 action suites here consisting of a collective 9 actions that have been identified to achieve objective 1. So actions under this objective are prioritized in the short term and are recommended to begin immediately to decrease waste being generated. So managing less waste, of course, is cost-effective for taxpayers. It prevents the extraction of natural resources and minimizes the amount of waste that needs to be managed at a disposal facility. So engagement participants frequently mention the importance of prioritizing reduction and reuse to protect the environment and to help keep waste management costs down. So action suite 1 focuses on increasing waste avoidance, reduction and reuse across the city through strategic partnerships with community and industry and financially incentivizing innovative ideas and programs, as well as expanding or improving our existing programs. So some examples of actions within this suite include community reuse events and repair cafes. So free events to support residents in swapping, sharing, and repairing items so that they don't end up in landfill. As well as an action focused on enhancing textile waste diversion. Action suite 2 targets a food waste reduction strategy and reduction education initiatives aimed to reduce the amount of food waste generated in the city. Action suite 3 recommends developing a plan to phase in additional reduction, reuse, and recycling management requirements at special events hosted by the city. Next slide, please. In terms of objective 2, maximizing the recycling of waste, actions under this objective that have the biggest impact ultimately on keeping waste out of the landfill, and they're also recommended for prioritization within the short term. So we learned through public engagement, very similar to the comments regarding reuse, that there is a preference for prioritizing waste diversion and delaying the need to invest in a new landfill or an alternative technology, and that was mainly due to the cost. So diverting more waste not only extends the life of the landfill, but it helps decrease greenhouse gas emissions from landfill and can help to generate revenue opportunities to help offset the cost of these programs. A total of 8 action suites have been identified to contribute to this objective, 4 of which are on the screen here. So action suite 4 looks at enhanced source separation of waste, which includes implementing actions to maximize diversion of waste from landfill, including a new curbside diversion policy and actions to encourage participation. Examples include reducing the garbage item limit, with council had approved earlier this year, implementing disposal bans, and enforcing source separation of recycling and organics. Action suite 5 focuses on decreasing waste generation and maximizing diversion of waste in multi-residential buildings. So some of the actions build upon the multi-residential waste diversion strategy that council approved last term of council, which makes it mandatory for multi-residential buildings to participate in the organics diversion program. But some of the additional actions that we're recommending here include updating our solid waste guidelines for multi-residential collection, our design guidelines, which support the site plan approval process, and piloting garbage chute closures or the introduction of organics only chutes at multi-residential buildings. Action suite 6 looks at diversion initiatives and what can be done in city facilities. So this opportunity to lead by example and increasing waste diversion and implementing more circular solutions in our city-owned facilities. So actions in here include a single-use item reduction initiative and mandatory waste diversion to all city facilities. And action suite 7 looks at implementing a broad-scale comprehensive waste diversion program with recycling and organics bins in parks and public spaces across the city of Ottawa. Next slide, please. So continuing on with objective 2, Action Suite 8 looks to develop a strategy to review residential generated construction demolition waste that focuses on decreasing waste generation, maximizing recycling diversion opportunities. From that, it tends to be the smaller amounts of home renovation waste. Along the same lines, Action Suite 9 looks at developing a strategy to review bulky waste that will focus on maximizing diversion of bulky waste, looking at new opportunities for reuse or recycling over landfilling, which is the current approach today. Action Suite 10 would explore developing a strategy to focus on decreasing hazardous and special waste generation and maximizing the diversion of hazardous special waste from landfill, but given some of the transition of a lot of that responsibility to individual producer responsibility. And the final action suite for Objective 2, number 11, explores sustainable development initiatives. So this would include implementing different financial mechanisms for new developments, as well as redevelopments to encourage waste reduction and diversion during the initial planning phase. So examples for this suite include implementing a waste diversion infrastructure fee, which would look at partnering with developers in helping deliver waste diversion bins, but also promotional material for as new homes are brought onto the service. A waste diversion infrastructure fee for new developments, as well as embracing the opportunity to utilize development charges for waste diversion growth, and then bonds for green buildings. Next slide, please. So in terms of Objective 3, maximizing the recovery of waste and energy and the optimal management of the remaining residual. So of course, not a surprise to anyone, but reduction diversion actions will help reduce the amount of waste going to landfill, but there will always be some form of remaining waste still left to manage, even if we fully optimize participation in existing programs. So these recommended action suites look at recovering resources and energy to keep with the waste plan's guiding principles to treat waste as a resource. So there are both a series of short-term and long-term actions that we're recommending here to find new disposal capacity for the remaining residual waste stream. So Action Suite 12 explores using a technology called anaerobic digestion to process household organic waste once our current contract is up in 2030. And generating renewable natural gas. So this is a recommendation in line with the goals outlined in the city's energy evolution plan. In line with what council approved last month, Action Suite 13 looks to increase the amount of leaf and yard waste that's separately collected and composted by the city. So overall, it helps reduce overall processing costs and it allows us some of that added flexibility to use the anaerobic digestion technology. Action Suite 14 will explore advancing the feasibility study and business case development to implement either a mixed waste processing facility or a waste to energy incineration facility. Both of these technologies are moving forward and proceeding with a feasibility study and business case will involve further analyzing waste stream compatibility, more refined costing and revenue opportunities, getting a greater understanding of the environmental impacts, the community support for these technologies, as well as market sounding to understand the various contracting and project delivery models that the city consider. Action Suite 15 looks at the development of a landfill gas management strategy to help determine how the city will manage landfill gas after our current agreement expires in 2027. So specifically focusing on exploring the opportunity to generate renewable natural gas instead of electricity, given the advancements in this market and alignment with the climate change master plan and energy evolution strategy. And Action Suite 16 speaks to the city's residual waste management strategy, which is focused on extending the life of trail and explores options to reduce waste generation and limit waste being landfilled. So recommended actions include the expansion of Trail Road waste facility within its existing footprint. So we've identified an opportunity there. Redirecting a portion of waste to private landfills, as was approved by council last month to coincide with our next collection contract. And a supplemental option that was actually developed in terms of or during our engagement series 2. And so that's in an effort to prolong the life of Trail Road. It's no longer accepting or receiving commercial waste at the trail waste facility landfill. So preserving the remaining capacity solely for residential purposes. One important note on this piece here is that the expansion of trail within its existing footprint, it could take up to 10 years. It requires substantial work with the ministry, with residents, with councillors and upper levels of government. So because of this, staff will be tabling a companion report alongside the draft waste plan at committee on November 21st, that we will be seeking council's direction to initiate the development of the terms of reference for the environmental assessment process. So that will be a critical step to provide the city with the additional runway to implement a future solution once trail is full. And of course, this should the province approve the expansion request. Next slide, please. So objective 4 focuses on maximizing operational advancements. So actions within this looks at new technology to make operations more efficient and less impactful on the environment. So Action Suite 17 explores the use of alternate collection containers in parks and public spaces and multi-residential properties. So it gives us an opportunity to pilot different technologies such as in-ground collection, multi-stream collection containers, waste bins with solar compactors. It's all about looking and piloting and trialing opportunities to improve collection efficiency, but also opportunities to improve accessibility for residents. Action Suite 18 looks at piloting radio frequency identification capabilities to help gain information about collection services and help improve our collection performance, and ensuring systems are in place to capture information on our vehicles. Action Suite 19 would undertake studies to review the efficiencies in curbside collection in relation to cost, services, and greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and review the potential of offering collection of additional materials not currently collected at the curb. Action Suite 20 looks at undertaking a review of the city's yellow bag program for businesses, including eligibility requirements and impacts on individual producer responsibility, specific to the recycling portion of that program. Action Suite 21 would explore switching from a bag-based collection system to automated cart-based collection of garbage to align with the next collection contract. Action Suite 22 includes the development of a strategy to integrate innovation into solid waste technologies to help drive the city towards its zero waste circular economy and climate change master plan goals, and includes completing a review of potential alternative and additional future uses of bufferland properties adjacent to our existing trail waste facility landfill. And Action Suite 23 focuses on working towards a zero emissions solid waste fleet. So building on the city's past and future green fleet related work and the energy evolution strategy, it would consider opportunities such as different fuel types, as well as the opportunity to consider renewable natural gas, hybrid, as well as electric vehicles for our entire solid waste fleet. And that's, of course, as technology advances and becomes proven for use in the Ottawa context. Next slide, please. And the last but not least objective looks to develop a zero waste culture across the city and includes just 2 action suites here, one grounded in promotion and education, and another focusing on the development of a circular economy strategy for the city. So this will be critical in guiding and supporting the community to change their lifestyles and waste management practices. So actions included as part of Action Suite 24 include increasing our investment in promotion and education to bring us in line with comparable municipal investment. Next slide, please. So combined, I know that was a lot of content and a lot of things that we're talking about proposing over the next 30 years, but combined, the proposed actions create an opportunity to significantly reduce the amount of waste going to landfill, divert valuable resources to be recycled and repurposed into new products, and further preserve and expand capacity at the landfill. So providing, again, that time for the city to choose to plan and implement our next residual waste disposal solution. So in the first 5 years of the waste plan, the proposed actions are expected to reduce waste to landfill by an estimated 2,750 tons and divert approximately just over 85,000 tons of divertible material from landfill. When we look at that over the 30-year term of the waste plan, the proposed actions are estimated to reduce waste to landfill by just over 31,000 tons and divert approximately 970,000 tons of waste from landfill. The estimated reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from landfill resulting from the proposed waste reduction diversion actions is over 138,000 tons of CO2 emissions. So this is equivalent to removing just over 1,400 passenger vehicles off the road, or the combustion of just under 2 million liters of gasoline each and every year. Reduction, reuse, and recycling and residual management initiatives, I think as Shelley had touched on, they're only going to get us so far though. So with the recommended actions that impact landfill life, we do anticipate that this will give us up to about an additional 14 years of life at the trail waste facility. So what this means, of course, is that we will still fall short of the waste plan's goal and council's goal of trying to extend the life of trail beyond the term of this plan, unless council chooses to invest in a new alternative residual waste management technology. So next slide, please. So if council chooses to implement a residual waste management technology, that does create the opportunity to further reduce waste from landfill and further increase landfill life. So in order to achieve the goal of the waste plan and extend the life beyond the term of this plan, 30-year plan, as mentioned on the last slide, staff are recommending that the city advance the feasibility study and business case in the short term to consider implementing a waste recovery technology to further divert waste and or reduce the amount of waste requiring landfilling in the longer term. So the two technologies that we're recommending for further consideration of are waste to energy incineration and mixed waste processing. So both technologies present different opportunities. They have different pros and cons, but both are proven technologies in managing municipal solid waste. So through the waste plan, we did look at a whole host of technologies, but these were the only two that were considered proven technologies at this time. So waste to energy incineration facilities combust municipal solid waste to produce energy. It's not considered waste diversion by the province of Ontario, but reduces the volume of waste requiring landfilling by approximately 73%, with the remaining ash requiring landfilling. So assuming council approves all waste reduction and diversion actions that staff are proposing through the draft waste plan, waste to energy incineration is estimated to extend the life of trail beyond the 30-year planning period. Furthermore, if waste to energy incineration, if a facility is used to generate steam to power a district energy heating system, so this could be used for housing, it could be used for an industrial development, it has the potential to reduce community carbon emissions more than our current approach of landfilling with electricity generation, or just under, as you can see on the slide, 33,000 tons of avoided CO2 emissions per year. The second technology for consideration, mixed waste processing. This is a mechanical process that separates materials that can be diverted from materials that can be landfilled. So this technology still heavily relies on landfilling, but it could open the door to piloting emerging technologies in the future to process parts of the remaining waste. So mixed waste processing has the potential to divert an additional 30,000 tons of organic waste from landfill every year. Of course, pending suitable end markets, and it also increases the capture rate of recyclables that still end up in the garbage. So assuming council approves all waste diverting options, again, that staff are proposing as part of the draft waste plan, mixed waste processing is estimated to extend the life of trail by an additional 4 years, so taking us to 2053. So when compared to the current approach of landfilling with electricity generation, by diverting extra organic waste from landfill, using mixed waste processing, it could reduce the city's carbon footprint by just over 6,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year. So another proven technology that we're recommending further exploring, as I touched on earlier, is anaerobic digestion. So this technology solely focuses on processing organic food waste. And this is to be considered once the city's current organics processing contract ends in 2030. So through this technology, organic food waste is used to make renewable natural gas, which has the potential to offset about 4,390 tons of CO2 emissions per year by 2053. So this is equivalent to the emissions from about 1,300 passenger vehicles or 1.87 million liters of gasoline each and every year. So it will come as no surprise that, of course, these technology options do require or will require significant financial investment, which we're going to cover on the next following few slides. So next slide, please. So what you're seeing here on this slide are 4 different scenarios in terms of estimated cost impacts to households to provide waste management services in the future. So before diving into this, I just want to remind members of council and those guests here today that a long-range financial plan is being developed to accompany the final solid waste master plan. And its intent is to propose a sustainable funding model for both our current as well as our future solid waste needs. And it's also going to set that affordability framework. So providing this information today will help set the stage for the level of investment that will be required to continue providing important core services to residents to maintain a clean, safe, and healthy community. So I just want to note as well that these of course are high level estimates. They're based on today's funding model and don't account for inflation. They were developed in conjunction with the city's financial services team, as well as the Waste Plan's technical consultants, HDR and KPMG. So beginning with the first scenario, so the gray line that you see, this shows the cost of status quo. So our baseline services today, the cost of essentially doing nothing. So over the next 10 years, there is a need for capital expenditures of approximately $200 million. A significant portion of that is required to cover the regulatory costs for our existing landfill and to maintain existing waste services. In addition, our solid waste capital reserve is currently in a deficit position without funding to support these future needs to maintain current services. There's also an additional estimated cost of $350 to $400 million for a new landfill to replace trail within the next decade, which is not currently included or in our 10-year financial plan, but we have added it and accounted for it here in the 10-year baseline forecast that you can see here in gray. Just a quick note, the gray line ends here at the 10-year mark because that aligns with our existing 10-year financial forecast. And of course, again, status quo, if we do nothing, there will still be a need for a landfill within the next decade. So it was important for us to share that regardless of council's decisions and directions when the final waste plan is presented, that rate increases will be required to cover the cost of the forecasted 10-year needs to continue to be able to provide these core regulated waste management services to residents. The remaining 3 lines here indicate the estimated impact of implementing the recommended actions of the solid waste master plan. So you can see here the orange line includes the core recommendations of the solid waste master plan, including a new organics anaerobic digestion facility opening in 2030. It considers the need for a new landfill in the mid to late 2040s and does not factor in alternative technologies for waste management. The blue and green lines factor in all solid waste management actions, including all of our baseline capital needs over the next 10 years. It also includes an anaerobic digestion facility, and it considers an alternative technology for waste management. So the blue line showing a waste to energy incinerator, and the green line showing a mixed waste processing facility. So the recommended waste plan actions will require around $280 million in new capital investment, and that excludes the costs for a new landfill or for an alternative waste management technology. So if council decides to pursue waste to energy, incineration, or mixed waste processing technologies, there will be additional costs. But both of these technologies could further delay the need for a new landfill, which results ultimately in greater cost and airspace savings at the trail waste facility landfill as well. So just a reminder again that these are high-level costing estimates. The intent here really is just to highlight the magnitude of the investment that will be required to pursue the recommendations or the recommended actions. And of course, our costs will be further refined through the development of the long-range financial plan for solid waste, but as well as programs are planned as feasibility studies and business cases are developed with each of the initiatives. The intent is that we will have multiple touch points with council that will take place, again, as we refine those different costs and are presenting opportunities for council to make decisions whether to proceed or not. So especially when it comes to those larger capital projects. So the key takeaway from this slide is whether the plan is approved or not, rate increases will be required to cover the cost of the forecasted budget needs over the next 10 years. So next slide, please. So with the anticipated cost increases in mind, I just want to briefly highlight what comparative municipalities pay for solid waste services. So comme vous pouvez le constater, Ottawa fait partie
As you can see, Ottawa in 2023 is part of the cities who are paying the least amount of money for their solid waste charges compared to the rest of Canada. As we saw in the previous slide, even if Ottawa were to get a new landfill, they would need other kinds of technologies, and we will be around the prices of Toronto and Vancouver.
These are current 2023 dollars. So Ottawa's residents wouldn't be facing charges of over $300 per year, per property per year for another 10 years. At which time we can assume, of course, that these cities here on this slide will also see increased changes in services due to market factors and trends such as inflation. So next slide, please. In terms of next steps, so following today's technical briefing, the draft waste plan legislative report and technical documents will be posted live for members of council and residents to review. The report will also then be tabled for discussion at committee on November 21st and council on December 6th. As Elaine mentioned at the onset of today's meeting, no decisions are being made with this report. We are tabling the draft before beginning our third and final round of engagement. We'll also be issuing a follow-up memo on the independent third-party review of the data used to develop this plan, as was directed by council when our curbside waste diversion policy report went forward for council consideration earlier this year. The intent would be within the next week and a half, a memo will be issued to members of council. And we've worked with Chair Menard as well to have the consultant available at committee to answer any questions that members of council may have. So following council's receipt of the report, we will launch engagement series 3 before finalizing the waste plan and its corresponding long-range financial plan for council approval in Q2 of 2024. So next slide, please. So in terms of engagement series 3, as you may recall, council approved a 3-phased approach to engagement. And this was really important to ensure that we are learning and hearing from residents, first and foremost, and making sure that their priorities, their interests are well considered as part of the plan, but also as an opportunity to gain their buy-in to the waste plan, because it's important recognition that we as a city cannot achieve the goals of the waste plan without the support from residents in making sustainable changes to how they manage their waste. So engagement series 3 will take place in Q1 of 2024 and will focus on the following objectives. So first and foremost, it's an opportunity to inform residents and stakeholders of the draft waste plan and what it entails, illustrating how stakeholder feedback from engagement series 1 and 2 has been integrated into the waste plan's development. And then, of course, providing an opportunity for feedback and questions on the draft waste plan to be asked and answered before tabling the final solid waste master plan in Q2 of 2024. And of course, it creates that opportunity for us to make tweaks and changes to the plan before bringing back for council consideration. So we do plan on hosting a series of in-person open houses, which we're quite excited because our last engagement sessions, of course, took place during the pandemic in a virtual manner. So it'll be really nice to get back out into the community. We'll also be hosting a series of virtual sessions. Online forum will be made available for residents to provide feedback. And of course, we'll also be following up with one-on-one sessions with members of council to seek feedback and hear what you're hearing directly from your residents. So building off of the successes and lessons learned from our first 2 engagement series to ensure that we reach and capture all the residents or interested audiences to ensure those who want to have their thoughts embedded in the plan do have that opportunity. As well, prior to engagement kickoff, we will be working with members of council, you and your offices to if there's an interest to co-host open houses within your community. So we'll be here to help support you in your offices. I see nods. with key messages to share information and materials to promote the sessions with your communities. So with that, I will hand things back over to Alain to wrap up before we hand the floor over to questions. Chair,
Alain, did you want to wrap up briefly? I think you did a wonderful job. Okay. Well, thank you, Alain, Shelley, and Nicole. We're now going to open the floor to questions from councillors or their designate. So when I call your ward, media relations will bring you the microphone. And again, you can ask one question and one follow-up. If your staff members are here instead, that's fine as well. They can ask the question on behalf of the ward. And if a member of council would like a question repeated in both languages, please just raise your hand. There's also simultaneous interpretation going on the YouTube stream. So we'll now begin with Ward 1. Is anyone here from Ward 1? Don't think I saw anybody. Okay, and I know I saw Councillor Duda, so we'll move right to Ward 2.
Merci beaucoup. First of all, I'll hold this away from this because this is very loud. Thank you very much for this. I know how far this plan has come, not only through consultations, but through the sponsors working group and staff's input. One of the things that I'm particularly pleased to see is the contemplation of alternative technologies and that you've got at least a couple of varieties in the mix. As a municipality, we're not alone. There are other municipalities, some adjacent, that are dealing with similar situations and are already having conversations about what to do with their waste. Pontiac region is one example, with the added difficulty of it being in Quebec as opposed to Ontario. As part of the plan and what you'll be coming back to us with, will you be anticipating potential partnerships with other municipalities, other entities? Also, too, I know I'm allowed one question, but this is like a bundled. Are there any overtures potentially available of funding from provincial or federal governments for this? Because regardless of what we choose to do or not do, it will come with a heavy price tag. So I would like to know if there's any opportunities for funding that you're aware of at this juncture that we can tap into.
Thank you for the question. So if council chooses and has staff proceed with the business case, the feasibility study, all of those things will be options or ideas that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at what funding may be available through the province and through the feds, and working with our finance colleagues in order to bring that into the long range financial plan. As far as partnerships, absolutely. So through the feasibility work, we have had some conversations with other Ontario municipalities, and that will continue as well. Recognizing the volume of waste that Ottawa has, it does make sense, and aligning with the goals and guiding principles of the waste plan for us to be that host, but certainly open to explore partnerships in order to ensure that we're bringing back something that is appropriate, financially responsible for our residents.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor. I saw Councillor Hill. Yeah, he's here. So Barhaven West.
Presentation. I don't know that this is necessarily a question for now, but I just put it out there as a stakeholder, put a stake in the ground on some information that I think is important as we go forward on this, and that's our collaboration with other partners and stakeholders in this space. I note, we're branding this as our solid waste master plan going forward for the city of Ottawa. But in reality, when we look at the city of Ottawa, there's a whole slew of other stakeholders that, they're still responsible from a solid waste perspective, but under different jurisdictions. And there's a lot of complexity in that ecosystem. And knowing that we're playing in that a little bit. So we have Trail Road as a landfill that we're using, but we're also looking at options with other private landfills as well, which is what other stakeholders are using, et cetera. There's a little bit of intersection in there that I would just, for my own benefit, I think would be of value for us to map that system a little bit better so that we understand where perhaps there could be some efficiencies and some cooperation, both from a funding perspective, from an operations perspective, and from leveraging those resources that help us with this process. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that comment. Councillor Cree or Ward 4, Canada North, is anyone present? And I'll just go back. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to Councillor Hill's question or comment or not, but appreciate the comment. Okay. And I see Councillor Kelly here. Ward 5, West Carleton March.
Thanks. Can we possibly go back to the anticipated cost increase slide for my question?
My question. Sorry. You took my question.
Apologize for the cough. So I'm no expert on anything to do with numbers, but when I look at this, you guys have made it pretty simple for a non-numbers guy like me. New landfill, cheapest, mixed waste processing, most expensive. Looks like waste to energy falls somewhere in the middle of that, but it looks like by 2053, the cost to run this new landfill, if we went that route, would be the same as the waste to energy incineration. Am I reading that correctly?
Thank you, Councilor, for the question. So correct. I think there's, as it stands today, landfilling has traditionally been the cheaper solution when you're comparing it to incineration. Of course, there's been a lot of advancement within the industry, but when you're looking at things more from a life cycle perspective, that's where you start to see the shifts and changes. So, of course, you have investments that need to be made with an incinerator, but also with landfill. So as we're developing new cells for the landfills, we're capping those cells. As part of the scope of the waste plan, we did not conduct a full life cycle analysis, but at least you're seeing here kind of a good sense of those earlier costs over the 30-year lifespan. However, during the feasibility and business case study, that is something that we'll look at as being able to do more the life cycle costing of those two different options.
Okay.
But you're absolutely correct in terms of what you're seeing here.
And then the other thing that I read that I just want to confirm, it looks like incineration versus the mixed waste processing in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions is not even close. Like the incineration takes it by a mile.
That's correct. When you look at it from the perspective of that opportunity, instead of generating electricity, but it's creating kind of a district energy-based system that's using the steam developed from that to offset RNG within the community. So certainly creates a greater opportunity, and that's in line with the city's climate change master plan. And that's really because we have a relatively clean electricity. So the greatest opportunity is in offsetting that heating requirement from natural gas.
Okay, and then one last question: the automated cart collection idea. Would there be a cost to residents for that, like to get a bin that works specifically with the automated machine, or would that be provided by the city?
If the intent would be that it be provided by the city, all the costs are included in the costing is included within the estimates here.
Okay.
So that would be the intent. But of course, before advancing that, we'd want to potentially look at piloting those different options, especially given some of the unique considerations with Ottawa in the winter time. And also just going through the thorough business case development on that piece as well.
Thank you. Sorry for asking 3 times the number of questions I was supposed to.
Good questions. Thanks, Councillor. Ward 6, Stittsville staff here. Okay. Ward 7, Bay Ward. So Councillor Kavanaugh's here.
Thank you very much. I know that we all believe that we have to do lots. And with all those points, we can see the work that has to be done. And it requires partnership. And my question is, in terms of the federal and provincial governments, obviously we depend on them in terms of like banning products, et cetera. And the other part is residents, and we rely on them, of course, because they actually have to do things correctly to help us reduce by putting things in the right bin. Communications then is a big part of what we have to do. But I'm wondering, in terms of the feds and province, can we put costs on our asks with them? Like if they banned a certain product or made things very clear, how much it would save us or how much it costs us if they don't? Because I think that would send a message, because we don't have much power over them. But obviously it's the same for all municipalities. But is there some way to do that? Because it frustrates me that we have to deal with things that still are not far from perfect if when industry doesn't have rules that we can't put in and would save us a ton. And it just makes sense overall, but we need to have it across the industry. We heard about the bannings of plastic and stuff, and it's not strong enough. Can we show the cost when they don't do that? Because I think that would be really helpful.
I think Councillor Aiden, all great points. Thank you for that. And then I'll pass it over to Shelley. And I think it's, it's a great point to make in terms of our continued advocacy. So we do a lot of work with municipal counterparts, in particular across Ontario to date. A lot of our work has been focused on advocating on behalf of the city as it relates to the transition to individual producer responsibility. But I think it's certainly an opportunity, and we've been doing just that kind of work as part of that advocacy, but certainly something that we can continue to be able to provide that sense of how much it costs us as a municipality.
Thank you. One of the things that I was excited about was increase of parks, recycling in parks. I get asked all the time. People really, really want to do it. So what's holding it up? What would it take to get those done beyond a pilot project?
So thank you, Councillor. And with the transition to the blue box for individual producer responsibility, we really wanted to wait to see what may come from those producers regarding these perfect locations where you have an influx of people drinking their Gatorade, having their pop. So it's a great collection spot. That hasn't realized itself yet. And so we're continuing with our pilot, and through this next budget cycle, looking to, pending council approval, looking to expand that. But as noted, there is an action item looking to have a full scale. So by expanding and continuing with the pilot a little bit longer, it gives us the opportunity to look at what a formal expansion, permanent, 3-stream, 2-stream recycling, whatever, in our park spaces, recognizing that we have over 900 park spaces. Not all of them are the same. So right now we are currently working with our colleagues in recreation and culture in order to try to highlight some of those well-used facilities that tend to get bookings through the weekends, in order to see what services we may be able to provide to them to increase recycling and to show that city leadership.
I appreciate it. And even if there's just, a great big bin at the park, just something like for composting or whatever in certain parks, because I can tell you there's the buy-in is huge. So on that side, I can understand that sometimes people don't use them properly and that contamination, et cetera. But there's still a lot of buy-in. In terms of demolition waste, it's always painful to see something knocked down or gotten rid of, and nothing happens, and we know it goes to landfill. Can the city lead the way by doing it on our own projects that we do? Can we be the ones that start it up? But I mean, you said in the notes that it's the provincial and federal governments that regulate it. But can we put in our own initiatives on things that we do ourselves?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So certainly, and I know there are certainly some efforts today that currently are undertaken with city construction related projects, but it's certainly, if that's an interest of council as an area to focus on, certainly an opportunity there to kind of further advance those opportunities with city-based projects. But of course, recognizing that that's something we would want to have a really good handle and understanding of the costs associated with that as well.
Yeah, well, that would be done at the beginning, so we know ahead of time. So obviously things that are in progress are more difficult, but we can do it going forward, hopefully, and factor that in. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Ward 8 College. Okay, let's see. I did see a staff person from Ward 9, Knoxdale Maribel, and Tim's just up there.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks for this session. It's really helpful. Oh, sorry, we got something we need to cover.
You can go ahead. We're just going on ward order.
Okay, great. Councillor Devine is watching online, but obviously can't put his questions in, so I'm his proxy for that. He's got a couple of things that he's interested in. One is we've heard in previous presentations that the runway required to implement new approaches is quite long. And based on your timelines, it's looking like it's getting pretty tight. So he's curious to know how quickly some of these major decisions are going to need to be made.
a great question. Thank you so much, Tim. So you're absolutely right. So in terms of when we're looking at a new landfill or some of those alternative technologies, you're looking at potentially between 8 to 15 years. And a lot of that accounts for, of course, the environmental assessment, approval process, siting process, as well as design, construction, building. In terms of how we have structured the recommendations in the solid waste master plan. So the waste diversion, the reduction options, also the recommendation for further preserving trail, diverting waste to a certain percentage of waste to private sector facilities. All of those combined have that opportunity to further increase the life of the landfill by about 14 years. As you'll recall as well, council has made a number of decisions over the past few years as well that are going to help buy us some of that additional time. So in particular, that decision that was made to coincide with our collection contract in 2026. Starting to divert some of that waste to private landfills. So all of those initiatives and actions together in the shorter term will help buy some of that additional time in order to have the to go through these approval processes. Shelley, anything you want to add?
Thanks, Nicole. So just a reminder, we're also tabling a report at committee that speaks to receiving council approval in order to initiate the terms of reference development for the expansion of the trail within the existing footprint. So recognizing the timelines that it takes, it could take 10 years in order to receive that approval, do the design and the construction, wanting to initiate that process now.
Right. So just to reemphasize it, so how much time are we talking about making the decisions themselves, though?
So I'll start with in terms of one of the core recommendations is advancing the pre-feasibility the feasibility study and business case for an alternative. An alternative solution. So the recommendation would be to begin almost immediately after the tabling of the final waste plan and being able to come back in about 18 months in order for council to make a decision within this term.
Okay, perfect. That was the first question. The second question is dealing with the question of lifespan. It's back to that slide again about long-term costs, assuming that you've put in maintenance costs, capital renewal costs, those sorts of things. But what isn't captured in that is lifespan. So the differences in lifespan between the different approaches, and is that relevant to the decision? And how much life are we talking about, say, out of a waste to energy facility versus a new landfill versus mixed processing, that sort of thing?
Certainly, great question, Tim. So I think in terms of those key pieces, that is something that we would be able to provide further analysis through the feasibility and business case.
Okay, thanks for that. I don't know if I see anyone from Gloucester Southgate, Beacon Hill, Searville, Rideau Vanier, or okay, Rideau Vanier. Perfect. Okay, Ward 12.
Bonjour, mon nom c'est Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I am Madame Stephanie Plant's assistant from Rideau Vanier, Ward 12. I'll repeat my question in English after, but I think that I'd like to use French first. Thank you so much for this discussion. It was very interesting, and I think that it's super important. For multi-unit residential buildings, we have a lot of them in my ward, and my question was about the program for small businesses. You mentioned in Action 12, or 20 rather, that you are going to reevaluate the program and reanalyze the conditions for the eligibility conditions for the program. Is it also possible to know how many small businesses participate in the program, and are they happy with the results? And is it possible to also consider other small businesses that are not participating at all right now, or that have alternative ways of managing compost and waste?
Take a deeper look at the Yellow Bag program and see how many small businesses are actively taking part and how many small businesses are being very happy with the results or utilizing other program instead of going with the City of Ottawa, because we do have a lot of small businesses in our ward. And I think that that would be a great initiative to just, lighten the load of waste altogether. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much for the question. So first and foremost, I think that is the intent of the Yellow Peg program review. So we have currently between about 300 and 400 small businesses that are currently participating in the entire city of Ottawa. That's correct. So the intent as part of the review would be just that. It's understanding how successful the program is to date. Generally, it has been smaller businesses that have generation very similar to residential households, as an example. So not necessarily including restaurants, as an example, that require a lot greater frequency and are generating a lot more in different types of waste in comparison to residential households, because we embrace and we're able to utilize our existing biweekly service. So it's certainly something, if that is the will and interest of council, to provide direction to staff to be able to look at that as part of the scope of the Yellow Bag program review, recognizing, of course, there would be, especially if we're looking at providing services or enhanced services to different types of businesses that would look at changing the collection frequency, that will come at a cost. But certainly, if that is something council is interested in, that could be a direction to staff. Okay. Thank you.
Wouldn't it be considered as data collection to just keep track of how successful the program is working? It just feels like 300 to 400 small businesses for the whole city feels a bit low.
So I would say it's not as simple as, and happy to take the conversation offline too, if you'd like, and we can have that opportunity to dive into it a little bit further. But it wouldn't be as simple as just adding on an additional collection, recognizing as well our collection contracts are fair and our collection fleet is reestablished and kind of based on the existing terms within the collection contract. And just that reminder too, that these small businesses, I think at the time, it was an interest of council to be able to help reduce costs to small businesses. So sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Shelley, was there anything else you wanted to add there?
Sure. So based on the criteria to qualify, so to Nicole's point, they are really small businesses that generate waste in a similar way as a single family residential household. And just to add on to Nicole's item regarding the initial intent was to provide recycling services for those small businesses. And now with the transition of recycling to the producers, moving and starting in 2026, the city will not be receiving any revenue for that. So it is inappropriate for us to bring back to council in order to ensure that it's still council's intent. And then what would the criteria of that program look like at that point? So the review of the Yellow Bag program is really necessary in order for us to bring back to council for the decision.
Okay, thank you for that. I saw Councillor King earlier, but I think he might have had to go. Anyone else from Councillor King's office? Okay. Councillor Truster, Ward 14, Somerset.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your questions about businesses, because that was going to be my question. Did you say that we don't work with restaurants with the Yellow Bag program?
The larger scale restaurants, yes.
Okay. Because there's so many small restaurants in Centertown, and it always kills me when I have to throw out my can when I'm in that restaurant. So I do think that is an important source of waste that we need to tackle. I was just wondering if you could give an update on the expansion of the green bin program to multi-residential buildings, because I have a lot of apartments and a lot more high rises coming into my ward. And I was really surprised when I knocked on doors during the election to hear how few of them actually had that program.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So we have just about 50% of all buildings across the city that now have a green bin program in place. Our intent is to be bringing back a report, an implementation update in Q1 of next year, and that will provide information on staff's intended implementation for mandatory rollout to the remaining properties. And we had also received direction from the last term of council to include all the financial implications as part of that report. So we're on track to be providing that update to council in Q1.
That's great because we're certainly not building single family homes in Centertown anymore. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor. Good question. Councillor Leeper.
You mentioned development charges and a waste infrastructure fee as potential revenue sources. Have you done any calculations on how much that could potentially raise?
So great question, Councillor. Not quite yet on how much that opportunity might, because it's also linked very much to sorry, let me take a step back. It's only for diversion-based infrastructure. And because right now, the way that we have contracted services, it's an opportunity if we are to look to that next solution post 2030. So that's where we'll have that opportunity as part of that feasibility and business case to be able to really flesh out the numbers to understand how much of that opportunity, the financial potential with that.
I want to ask, can I ask like a follow-up sorry, a ton of questions on that. Would we miss a development charge cycle?
So the intent would be that we can align with the next development charge cycle.
Okay. And I'll make it a really quick question for second one. The draft actions could divert 2,750 tons over the next, I'm trying to remember the slide that I saw it on. How much of that is due to diverting upwards of 30% of our curbside waste to private landfill?
So I'm just going back to that one, Councillor. So for the 2,750 tons, so that's actually looking at waste reduction potential with the introduction of new waste reduction. So the diversion, I'll just get Mary, if you can go back to slide 15. Perfect, thank you. So that's the waste reduction. The diversion potential, if you see there within the first 5 years, is that opportunity to divert up to an additional 85,780 tons within the first 5 years.
And how much of that is from private landfill?
So no, yes, that also includes under that particular piece, sorry. So the 14 years total, yes, that includes the landfill expansion. So the opportunity to extend the landfill. It also includes the redirection to private landfills, as well as the implementation of the different solid waste master plan waste diverting actions. So the waste diverting actions themselves, you're looking at potentially between 4 to 5 additional years of landfill life. So the remaining is made up by that 30%. The redirection of up to 30% of waste to private landfill, as well as the expansion of the trail waste facility within its existing footprint.
I'll follow up.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. Can you just expand on the expansion of Trail Road? I wasn't aware that we had capacity still. If you could just, how much land are we going to use? What's the area? And just from my own knowledge, is the current height of the pile at capacity, or can we continue to increase the size? What does the province cap landfill heights to be? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. So I'll answer the second question first. So the height of Trail Road now, that is the maximum. So when we're going to expand, there are opportunities between stages 4 and 5. There's a valley that we would look to build up, which wouldn't change the overall height of the landfill. And through that action, plus another small section, it would be adding about 8 years of landfill life, given if we continue to consume landfill space like we do today.
Okay. Thank you. Good question. Thanks for that. Alta Vista, Sir Clark.
What?
You're next.
Me? Thank you very much for the presentation. Just want to follow up on Councillor Kelly's question where he was speaking about the cart system. If we were to look at a change such as that, that is the opportune time that we could potentially also look at billing as a utility? Because when you show the prices of the different jurisdictions, a lot of those that are higher priced are billing as a utility for garbage now. And that is probably one of the greatest incentives for people to reduce their disposal habits.
I knew you were going to ask, and it's perfect. I'm glad you, because Shelley gave me the little nod, like, I didn't think you quite answered it well. So you're absolutely correct. So when I was talking earlier about the costing, the actual capital cost of the bills, or sorry, the bins themselves is what was accounted for as part of these preliminary financial estimates. But you're absolutely right, Councillor. There is that opportunity. And as part of that work leading up to sorry, that's where council would have that opportunity to also look at, or as staff, we would bring forward a recommendation looking at the different models. So there could be, as an example, we're continuing with a one size fits all. There is that opportunity for a variable rate system, very similar to the City of Toronto, as an example. So where residents have the opportunity to pay based on their actual disposal needs. So that would all be kind of included within the scope of that particular action.
Excellent. Just as a follow-up to that, are you familiar with any municipalities across Canada that have adopted a cart-based system that haven't moved to a utility model, or have most that have carts charging as utility now? Do we know that?
It's a good question, Councillor. I know we recently did some research on it, so I can do a follow-up on that. But I look at the city of Gatineau as an example as our neighbor. So they do have a flat fee, and that's based on a one size. And then they have kind of a pay-as-you-throw opportunity above and beyond that. And then there are municipalities that have some of the variable programs, but I can dig up some of that research and provide that to you. No problem.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Kitts.
Hi, thank you. My question feels simplistic, but I missed the beginning. You probably covered this already. But I mean, the actions are somewhat high level. So we're setting a direction, and then kind of, as you were just explaining, for every action, the more detailed plan will come through committee. And at that point, we'll have a chance to sort of dig into it. That's how this is going to work.
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay, great. Because I'm curious to see how nimble each of these action plans are going to be to respond to behavior change and the projections, and if there's contingency for if we're not hitting those targets. But that'll all sort of be covered in detail as we go through.
Absolutely, Councillor. And just to let you know as well, so our intent is also to have being able to bring annual reporting back to members of council. So you'll actually see within the draft waste plan, there's a number of recommended performance measures. So for each of the actions that we consider, so we'd be reporting back to council on an annual basis. So that opportunity to provide insight and that opportunity for us to be able to pivot if some of those actions we're not achieving what we had originally set out to achieve. But then there's also the 5-year review period to coincide for the solid waste master plan. So we'd be looking at a comprehensive review every 5 years.
Okay, that's great. And then my second question, completely agree with Councillor Kavanagh about parks. And I know that you're looking to illustrate how feedback from the previous engagement series sort of fed into this plan. Not to put you on the spot, but could you sort of maybe choose a couple that recurring major themes that you heard from the public that have worked its way into this plan?
No, it's a great point, Councillor. Thank you. So I would say some of the recurring themes. So first and foremost, hearing that interest and that priority on focusing on waste reduction, reuse and recycling, like making sure that that is an important part of the plan. There was a lot of interest from the community in considering innovation and looking at different technologies to be able to manage our waste. But at the same time, kind of the number one key consideration from residents was cost and wanting to make sure that whatever is being considered is affordable. So I would say that summarizes at a high level, but we do have some specific feedback on some of the different action items as part of that. Of course, parks is one of top interest, but there was some interesting dialogue when you start looking at, waste from parks represents just over 1% of all waste that we manage as a city. So kind of looking at the pros and cons of the investment. So that there was some interesting discussion with residents as part of some of those focused group sessions. But the full What We Learned report will be included with the legislative report as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much for this.
Thanks, Counselor. So Ward 20 Osgood, Ward 21 Rito Jock, Ward 22 Riverside South Finley Creek, Ward 23 Canada South, and Ward 24 Barhaven East. Okay. So thanks very much, colleagues, for your questions. Great questions. Feel free to depart. We're going to proceed with the setup for the media availability. So we're just going to take a brief 5-minute break, and then we'll return for questions from the media. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Kendra Titley and I will be your moderator. Je m'appelle Kendra Titley et je serai l'animatrice de ce point de presse. I will now invite each agency to ask their questions in alphabetical order. You may ask one question with a follow-up. Nous allons maintenant répondre aux questions des médias qui pourront poser une question et une question de suivi. When asking your questions, please identify who your question is directed to and please use the microphone provided. Lorsque vous posez vos questions, veuillez indiquer à qui s'adresse votre question et veuillez le faire au micro. We'll now start with Elise Skura at CBC Ottawa.
Thank you very much. My first question is for staff, and I'm just hoping that in layman's term, you can kind of explain the different technologies, like what this mixed waste processing and the waste to energy conversion would actually look like.
So first and foremost, mixed waste processing, it's a mechanical process. So think as residents put their waste out on the street, in some cases we're still seeing a high percentage of organics and recyclable material. So this is essentially insert new process, which mechanically separates that organic as well as those recyclable materials. Those can be sent off for further recycling, and in other cases for whether composting as an example. And then whatever is left over, still waste, goes to landfill. So that's mixed waste processing. Waste to energy incineration is essentially combusting waste. So combust waste, and through that process, you have an opportunity to generate electricity. There's also a lot of heat that is created through that process. So that heat can actually be used as a heating source for homes or for industry. And that actually offsets the need for natural gas for those facilities.
And those are built at the landfill site or in another location? Sorry.
No, it's a great question. So we're not quite at the siting process at this point, but there certainly could be an opportunity for us to look at some of the lands that we have around the existing landfill, or potentially in a different location across the city. That would be the next stage that we start looking at some of those opportunities as we conduct a feasibility and a business case if council chooses that's the direction to take.
Great. And my second question is just about how much it will actually cost per household. I wonder if you could summarize what households pay now and what they would pay if those technologies were instituted.
So if you look at the cost per household, so the way in the city of Ottawa right now, you pay a mix of a rate as well as a taxation component. So in 2023, Ottawa residents paid on average $185 for the year for solid waste services. Now, when you're looking at implementing an alternative technology, over the 30-year process, so keeping in mind by the time we're at 2050, you're looking at a cost per household just under $500 per household. That's with waste to energy, but also keeping in mind that very similar for implementing the waste plan initiatives as well as a new landfill. So very similar in terms of costing. And then if you're looking at a mixed waste processing technology, again, at that 30-year mark, you'd be looking at between $500 and $600 per household per year. Keeping in mind that that's actually quite in line with a lot of what comparator municipalities and households pay for disposing and having their waste managed. So that would kind of put us in between where Toronto residents and residents of Edmonton pay currently today in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Leah Larocque at CTV Ottawa.
So I'm not sure who could answer this question, but we only have, if I'm understanding this correctly, we have about an 8 to 10 year runway to implement one of these big changes, like an incinerator or a new landfill. But our landfill only has about 10 years left. So is this feasible? And the city has known that this has been coming. We've had to make this decision for quite some time. So are we playing catch up, I guess?
Great question. Thank you, Leah. So in terms of the way that we've structured the waste master plan, so the combination of the waste reduction as well as the waste diversion opportunities, in addition to looking at banning industrial, commercial, and institutional waste from Trail Road and starting the redirection of about 30% of waste. So utilizing for efficiency purposes some of those private sector landfills in the east end and the west end of the city. In combination, that's looking at gaining the city an estimated 14 years. So right now, that would take us into potentially the mid 2040s. So buying that additional time that's needed to go through the appropriate approval processes for a new technology or a new landfill, depending on the direction that council wants to take. So the intent here, and council's also been making a number of decisions over the past couple of years on a number of related initiatives that are helping us buy some of that additional time to give us that additional runway.
Councillor Menard, I was just wondering, there was a lot of debate and discussion about limiting garbage collection to the 3. We ended up with the 3 containers. So that took a lot from council to get to that point. These are some big decisions that council now has to face. Are you confident that this council and committee can make a decision?
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, at the end of the day, there was a decision made, and it's a reduction in what people are allowed to set out at their curbside for households. With regard to this suite of changes, which will include that change that council made earlier this term, there's about 50 actions there that I think are going to be interesting to delve into. So if you look at some of the examples that staff have talked about, I think we've always talked about more education. We've talked about green bins in multi-residential and expanding that program. There's a lot of, I think, important initiatives that you said he's doing. And I think, yes, this committee, this council are going to look forward to making those changes in Q2 of 2024. Obviously focusing on value for money and what gets us the most bang for our buck in reducing waste to landfill. So very confident in our council to make those decisions. And even though that the tag a bag versus the 3-bag limit, we had that robust debate. I think that's what those debate about. Waste touches everybody in the city, and that's what that debate looks like. And I think at the end of the day, we came to a conclusion. Now we know we need to go further on some of these other initiatives based on the decision council took just a few months ago.
Thank you. We'll now go to Andrew Duffy at the Ottawa Citizen.
So first off, I'm wondering, has the city made a philosophical commitment to dealing with its waste within its own borders?
So that is one of the core guiding principles that council approved as part of setting the vision for the solid waste master plan, but recognizing where it is actually feasible to do so and makes kind of that economic and operational sense.
So does that mean no?
That means yes. But there may be considerations. So for an example, I'll give you an example where we may not have a market for a certain product. So I'll give you an example of mattresses. Mattress recycling, we don't have a facility that exists within the city of Ottawa. There's facilities that exist within Montreal. So if there's an opportunity that we can build that business case and there's that ultimate that can achieve one of the goals, well, it doesn't necessarily align with that guiding principle, but it may create that opportunity.
And so as part of this process, have you yet identified any potential landfill site within the borders of the city of Ottawa?
So for anything new, we have not advanced to the siting process at this point. However, just linking back to some of the decisions that council made just last month, we are looking at contracting some private sector capacity to private facilities within the city of Ottawa come 2026 with our new collection contract.
Okay.
Thank you. On va maintenant à Frédéric Papin à Radio-Canada.
OK. En français, ça serait avec vous, Monsieur Gontier, j'imagine.
Mr. Gauthier, I can do it in French, yeah.
So we're talking about the future here with this plan, and the incinerator seems like the most logical option for not needing a new landfill and everything else. But right now, we're telling people to do better and make less waste when eventually we might need a lot more waste to have an incinerator. So it's a mixed message that we're sending people at home. What do they need to understand from what we're trying to achieve here?
So council would have to make a decision on a feasibility study for both the mixed waste processing or the incineration. That decision's yet to be made. And so we need to look at that. In terms of the mixed message, I don't think it's a mixed message. We know we have to reduce our waste to landfill. If you don't do that, even an incineration becomes much more expensive. So either way, we need to reduce our waste at source and going to landfill. I think that this team's committed to that. And that's been the message, since we started this, that no matter what technology or other landfill we come up with, the province has outlined those mandates for us. The federal government is making changes on what we can use and what we can't use. We need to stick to that mandate that council's established through this process.
Thank you. Monsieur Gontier, l'incinérateur pour Ottawa,
Now, this incinerator for Ottawa, do we have enough garbage? The councillor asked if there's any talks going on with other municipalities. In that context, it becomes rather interesting. Do we have enough garbage for an incinerator in Ottawa? Because like Councillor Menard said, too much, of course, would not be an option because, but it also needs to work in order to produce electricity. Can you tell me more about that concept? Well, both contexts exist. One, have we discussed partnerships with other municipalities? Yes. When we undertake the feasibility study, certainly we will be able to take that into account. Now, when it comes to what Councillor Menard has just said, he's absolutely right. So even if we had an incinerator, that doesn't mean we're going to encourage people to buy more stuff in order to create more garbage. Obviously not. In fact, the contrary, we're going to encourage people to have less waste because all operational costs, all volumes have a cost associated. So even if we were to build an incinerator, it doesn't mean that, it's a big bonanza and you can just put anything in there. There is a cost, an operational cost and capacity cost that happens there. So our emphasis is always going to be on the reduction of waste, whatever solution we decide to choose in the end. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes today's technical briefing and media availability. Ceci conclut le point de presse d'aujourd'hui. Thank you. Merci.